welcome to today's rant. And today's December the 1st, 2025. And happy Monday. Great day. And a lot of people dread Mondays, have to go back to work. You know, that should not be the case with any mature Christian. And mature Christians have learned to turn whatever they consider drudgery or anything hard into worship to the Lord. They do it as unto Him. And if we will learn to turn our drudgery to the Lord, thanking Him for it, doesn't it say in everything give thanks? This isn't everything. Monday isn't everything. You'll be amazed at how great Mondays will become for you. How great whatever drudgery you have chosen to turn into worship. Why does this happen? You know, we enter His gates with thanksgiving, His presence with praise. And it says in His presence is fullness of joy. It's impossible to be depressed when you're in the presence of the fullness of joy. I'm just saying, you learn to turn whatever's going on that's hard in your life into something you thank the Lord for. You really become thankful for. You'd be amazed at how it changes your life, and some of your worst days can become your best days. So let's just do that with Monday. Thank the Lord for Mondays. Thank Him that we get to go back to work, that we have a job, that we live in this great country, that, you know, many other things. And if we're in a bad thing, a bad part, whatever, let's thank Him for that. He considered us worthy to go through this. And He would not allow us to be tested by anything that is beyond our ability to take it, to endure it. He tells us that's Scripture. He will not allow us to be tested beyond what we can handle. So we know if we can handle it, you know, we can handle it if we're in it. And then we know if it starts getting to a place where, you know, this is just not possible to handle anymore, you're close to your deliverance. Because He won't let you go to that point where you can't handle it. So don't cave in at the end. Continue to thank Him and trust Him. He is trustworthy in these things. Okay. So let's resolve we're going to do that for everything this week, everything this month. We just had Thanksgiving. To me, one of my favorite of all holidays. Now, I love Christmas too. It's a great family time and all that. And I love it. And I love the celebrations and all the colors and decorations and, all that's wonderful. But, something about Thanksgiving that it's a whole day just to focus on Him, give Him thanks for our blessings. What a worthy holiday. And I've spent mine this year in Selma, Alabama. Actually a very great place. One of my kids and her husband, one of my daughters and her husband bought a place there. Incredible estate. I mean, it was built by a former Civil War soldier. When he came home from the Civil War, he built this awesome home. And great land that comes with it, And they got it so cheap. I mean, it's incredible. In California, this place would be worth millions. And in North Carolina, it would be worth a lot. There's no doubt. And what they got it for was unbelievable. Their mortgage payment is less than $1,000 a month. I'm just saying. So we went down there to see their new place and never not seen it, just seen pictures of it. And it was even better than the I was expecting. It was really a wonderful place with incredible potential. They've already got plans for fixing it up, and they've already started, and it's a very cool place as it is. But they they've already done a lot. Anyway, we were down there for that, and really, I'd never been to Selma, Alabama. It's a town about, I think it's 40 miles from Montgomery, Alabama, to the west of Montgomery, and very interesting place. And, a real historic city during the Civil Rights Movement. The march from Selma to, of course, or Montgomery to Selma, or Selma to Montgomery, is one of the famous events during the Civil Rights Movement. And of course, I crossed that bridge, going there and coming, and couldn't help but just be, take note of this, really truly historic place, and really helped to change America in a good way. A lot more change to be done, but that was something that really, really helped, really marked a turning point in America. So, we have a couple of things to talk about. Why don't I do weather and sports before I do the news? I start with a word for the day. And the weather, it's incredible. The high today will be about 40 degrees where I am in Moravian Falls, on top of our mountain. Up here, it's a little cooler than everywhere else, but just a great, beautiful sunny day. Tonight, rain is moving in, then freezing rain, expecting a lot of ice. And that's always interesting when you live on a mountain. And but anyway, I look forward to it. Oh, I got plenty of firewood. I'm going to stay warm, and got my dogs to keep me company. We may have what we call porch summits today, where a bunch of guys gather and have a fire. We do cigars and hang out and just have the best time. But anyway, we may do one of those today before the ice and rain comes. But yeah, I love it up here. I love it back down in Fort Mill at Heritage, another special place, special people. But anyway, there's your weather report for us. And then sports. How many of you saw, if you watched the NFL yesterday, our Carolina Panthers beat what was supposed to be the hottest team in the NFL, the front runner, probably forecast to be the top seed in the NFC. The Los Angeles Rams came to visit Carolina and went home a loser. And Carolina beat them. And Carolina is shocking everybody with every game. The games they should win, they shock everybody by losing. And the games they shouldn't even have a chance in, they shock everybody twice as much by winning. But they're still in the playoff hunt, and actually for winning their division, when they've been the worst team, one of the worst teams in the NFL for several years now. And but anyway, their quarterback is getting his sea legs. He had a big learning curve. Every new quarterback in the NFL, it takes years for them to really get the new system, the much higher speed, faster speed, and everything else. The things move on a professional level. But I became really interested in the NFL. I actually watched the first Super Bowl. Remember today, the Green Bay Packers against the Kansas City Chiefs. Way back then, Vince Lombardi and all. I was 15 years old. And I just kind of got interested in it. And then when I, went on later to have a lot of friends in the NFL, and the Lord had spoken to me in 1982 how many of his greatest leaders in the last days, he said, was going to come from professional sports. And he said this to me in 1982. And he said sports was their seminary, and they were being taught important things in their seminary that the church does not teach in its seminary. For instance, teamwork. How you cannot, in a team sport, you cannot win without becoming a tight team that learns to work together, to flow together. If you're in basketball, you've got to be able to recognize who's got the hot hand. Somebody will get the hot hand where it's like they can't miss. They'll enter what's called the zone. And if you're on that team, your job is to get the ball to the person with the hot hand. But you got to recognize that. And in the church, I think if we would learn to, help the people get positioned who are anointed for that time, get the ball to them, help promote their message, their message to the church and what all they're doing, their ministry. We would all benefit much better if we would learn to do that. And I had a lot of friends in the NBA and NFL. And, I spoke to a lot of teams often in their chapel, which they would have on Sunday mornings before their game Sunday afternoon. And I loved doing it. I loved meeting them and spending time with them. They'd often have me spend the team meal with them before the game. And I got to meet some of the most interesting people in the NFL. And of course, some became close friends. And Reggie White, for a while, I thought he was definitely one of my very best friends. And one of the great people I've ever known, one of the greatest people. He was extraordinary. And like all the great people, like King David and anybody else you mentioned, Peter, others, they had flaws. They made mistakes. We all do. How many of you know I have? Plenty. And it seems like the greater they were in the Lord, the bigger their mistakes were. King David did something I still today personally think it's the worst mistake, biggest sin ever committed in the Bible, in my opinion. To kill to have one of his faithful followers, closest, most faithful men killed to cover up his adultery with that man's wife. I don't know how it could get any worse. But the Lord knew that was going to happen with David when he called him. The Lord knows the end from the beginning. The Lord knew all along this is going to happen. It's going to be a big embarrassment to the kingdom. And it was horrendous thing when Israel found out about this terrible sin that was committed. You really can identify with Israel while they would think there's no way God can still be with this person. He could no longer be anointed by God to be king over Israel after he did such a thing. And it says all of Israel went astray and followed after Absalom. They went astray from the Lord. It had a terrible civil war. Many, many Israelites were killed in it because of this sin. But the Lord knew all along that was going to happen to David. He called him anyway. He loved him anyway. And he loved him after it happened as much as he loved him before it happened. And the Lord stayed faithful to David to the end. And one of the most astonishing things in the Bible that I know theologians that refuse to believe it's supposed to be in the Bible. And they claim to believe in the Bible, the whole Bible. But this is just too far. But how the Lord, after, you know, David had his faithful soldier, devoted follower, one of the mighty men of Israel, killed so he could cover up his adulterous relationship with his wife, with the man's wife. Once he was killed, David married his wife. And then, if that could be a stretch, and the Lord allowed it. And then the Lord called the son born in this relationship that started as an adulterous relationship, would call the son of that relationship to be the heir of David and the next king. How could that possibly happen? How could the Lord possibly do that? Solomon was the son of that relationship. Now, they had gotten married since, but still the whole thing just stretches you beyond either. But that to me is God's grace. God's mercy, God's grace, it's beyond human comprehension. It's way beyond. And I just still now, personally, by God's grace, I have never, ever been unfaithful to my wife, ever. And I can't say I wasn't tempted, but I was, especially when I was a professional pilot and flying all over the place. But by God's grace, he kept me. And I'm not claiming to have done it. I'm not claiming my strength or whatever. I really never wanted to be unfaithful. I wanted to stay faithful to my wife and to the Lord. And by his grace, and I'm not, I'm saying to this day, that's the case. And, but it is shocking to me the grace and the mercy of God will stretch us in our understanding. I know people too that have committed abominable things in their marriage or relationships, and God didn't bless that. I mean, he brought judgment on them, on their house, just like he did on David. David really suffered for the rest of his life for what he had done in his own family. And I've seen that happen too. There are consequences. Even though the Lord forgives, we have to reap what is sown. There are consequences that will come upon you. It's never worth it. Never. And I've seen all that happen. But the Lord will continue to be with that person, answers their prayers, does mighty miracles through them. And I know a number of cases like that. And the Lord is still with them. And I believe they come back into a relationship with the Lord, close to him, maybe closer than ever. Because those who are forgiven much, we're told, will love much. And, but it's better not to do it. I'm just saying, much better not to do it. So, anyway, there's, just things that are meant to stretch us. So be stretched. Just say, Lord, I'm going to go with mercy. The Lord, you think about it. How was Jesus? He showed almost unlimited mercy and grace towards sinners and their sin. He would cover it. He went to the cross for that. That's how powerful the cross is of the Son of God. Can cover virtually anything. and redeem and restore. And these are, to me, these are the biggest thoughts we need to be thinking that tell us of God's nature. And, he had seemingly unlimited mercy and grace on sinners, but he had none for the self-righteous. That's the worst sin. That's far worse than what we tend to condemn and everything. And those are the ones we elevate and esteem and trust in. They were the ones who killed the Lord. It wasn't the sinner who loved Jesus. I'm just saying, I think it'd be better. Yeah, I've said for my whole life, Christian life, is since I've been in preaching and writing and all, there are two ditches on either side of the path of life. There's lawlessness on one side and legalism on the other. And the path of life goes down between those two ditches. So to stay on the path of life, we have to stay out of each of those ditches. We don't want to fall into lawlessness, and we don't want to fall into legalism. But if you've got to lean one way or the other, I would lean away from the legalism. That's a far worse ditch to fall into. It was the Pharisees, the religious conservatives, that had Jesus crucified. It was not the sinners. They loved Jesus. They flooded. They came to him because he was merciful and gracious. They knew they were sinners. Remember, Jesus talked about the two men who came with their offerings to the Lord. One was a Pharisee, and he was just looked around, and the other man there was a sinner, and he was just humble. He was broken before the Lord. Just all he could cry out for was mercy. So, Lord, I'm just a sinner. I need mercy. Please give me mercy. And the Pharisee was saying, Lord, thank you for making me better than that man, not like that man. And when the Lord asked, who do you think left there justified? They all, everyone would think, well, the one who's righteous and upright. No, the sinner left there more justified and more righteous before the Lord than that Pharisee. Listen, legalism is far worse to fall into, and that judgmentalism. And we judge the sin. We cannot start saying that sin is not sin. It leads to a worse kind of lawlessness that it's hard for people to ever get out of. We got to call sin, sin. The Bible is clear about it, and we need to be clear about it. The things that are sin that will keep us. When Paul listed the works of the flesh in Galatians 5 and 6, he listed the works of the flesh, and even anger was in there with adultery and fornication. Everything else that we tend to think is way worse, anger was listed in there. And he said, those who practice these things will not inherit the kingdom of God. Now, to practice something is more than just occasionally fall into something. Everybody falls to, hopefully not adultery and not some of the worst things listed there or the extreme things listed there, but, many of the things there we're all guilty of. Pride, and our criticisms of others and judgmentalism. And but we may fall to these occasionally. But there's a difference in falling to something occasionally and practicing it where this is your nature. No, we've got to be taking on the nature of Christ, the nature of the Lord. But he was merciful and so quick to forgive anybody who came to him for mercy or grace. And we need to be the same way. We uphold his standards of righteousness, but not with an elevated concept of ourselves because we haven't done these things or not now doing them and looking down upon others. No, we're all in need of his grace and mercy of the cross. The Lord said, even those who, in their hearts consider adultery, it's the same as doing it to him. So if you've ever had thoughts of adultery or any of these things, he said, you're guilty. Jesus said that. So, who are we to condemn anybody? Let's just thank the Lord for the grace and mercy that keeps us as much as we're kept. And where we don't presume upon his grace and mercy, either we're thinking we can just go on sinning and he'll forgive us. That's a terrible presumption that'll get you into even worse trouble. We can't do that either. But let's just be thankful. And we know if we've been kept from things, it was him that kept us. And that, we're not going to be proud about it because God resists the proud, but gives his grace to the humble. Okay. So I don't know who that was for. Hopefully it meant something to someone out there because I was not planning to talk about that at all. But I did want to mention something about the National Guard, 2 National Guardsmen, one was a woman, shot in D.C. by a radicalized Afghani, who was Afghanistan refugee from Afghanistan, who was supposedly radicalized here in America. Afghanistan is one of the most radical, profoundly radical countries in the world, radical Islam. He wasn't radicalized there, and that's where he was born and came from. Comes to America and gets radicalized. How does that work? Well, there are many people here, unfortunately, from all over the world, whose intent was to come here and help destroy America. They've been working for a long time to radicalize everyone they can and to undermine what's going on in America as much as they can, and are seeking our destruction. And so I think these things are going to come out more and more. In 2018, I was given a dream, one of the most profound, graphic dreams I've ever been given about the coming Second American Revolution / Civil War coming to America. And that was about to be 7 years ago. And I think it was December 2018. But anyway, it's all coming true. I get asked a lot, do you still see that coming? I've never changed. Matter of fact, every year I see more and more evidence of how much closer we're coming to that day. Now, one of the things I've also been writing is I put out a warning in a recent prophetic bulletin about you cannot defeat an enemy you do not see. And I don't think any president we've had recently, even George Bush, who, after 9/11, he mobilized and we went into Afghanistan, went into Iraq. A lot of that was an overreaction, in my opinion. But Afghanistan, it was a valid, that's where the attack came from on our country. And, we're told that civil government, Romans 13, civil government does not bear the sword for nothing, but it bears the sword to avenge evil. We're told that. So civil government that does not use the sword, which was then in biblical times, military power was the sword, and still represents military power. If civil government does not use its power and authority with the sword, with weapons, to avenge evil, it would be rebelling against God, not doing its job. It's here to keep the relative stability on the earth while God's preparing the way for his kingdom. And it has to do that. Civil government has to respond to evil, or evil will instantly take over the earth in a form of evil far worse than we've ever seen through Nazism, communism, or anything else. Lawlessness is worse than that. But I'm just saying, so it's a restraint. But we have enemies both foreign and domestic. And I think President Trump has been the only one who's really understood both. And he's dealing with both. He is using military power, his military power, the military power of the U.S. to avenge the evil that's being done to our country. The attack on our country through the drugs and sex slavery and everything else that's going on. Human slavery. There are more slaves in the world today than there's been at any time in history. And we think we've eradicated slavery. It's just gone underground. But any form of slavery is evil. It's a terrible evil. And but I am thankful of our president. But the hard part of this battle is coming as we start to deal with the enemies within. There are even American people who hate America and who are trying to destroy us. They're siding with our enemies. They're siding with those who hate America. And it's going to get more and more ruthless. Now, I actually wrote about this from a vision I had in 87, 2.5-day vision. And I wrote about it in 1988 when I tried to write the whole vision out in a book, my second book called The Harvest, which was published in 89, I think, beginning of 89. And it's still one of my bestsellers. But at that time, so many things were in that book that seemed so impossible that now are history. You read that book now, about 2/3 of it reads like history. Well, we know that, but you got to think about when I wrote it. It not only had not happened, it seemed impossible to happen. And 2/3 of it has happened. And maybe 3/4 now, and it's happening. We're moving resolutely towards the conclusion of that, which is going to be the greatest ingathering of souls the earth has ever known. The end. Jesus said the end of the harvest is the end of the ages, the harvest. It's when all the seeds that have been sown in the earth, spiritual seeds, soulish seeds, all the seeds, physical seeds are going to come to full maturity at the same time. That's why at the end, we're going to have the biggest battle going on between good and evil. All the good that's been sown in man is going to be battling the evil in their most mature forms. That's why Isaiah 60, you see, when darkness covers the earth and deep darkness the people, his glory will rise upon you, the Lord's glory, and his glory will appear upon you. We see at the very time of the darkness and deep darkness covering the earth, covering the people, the Lord's glory appears on his people. And it says that there, on you. My glory will appear on you and in us. So we're going to see the greatest moves of God at the very time and the greatest chaos on the earth, the greatest tribulation there's ever been on the earth. Well, everybody wants the revival, but we don't want the other. We want it to be done in a peaceful earth. Not going to happen that way. We've got biblical prophecies that actually began in Genesis until now. Tell us that story and make it clear. The end of this age is going to come with the greatest tribulation the world's ever known. But as Paul said in Acts 14:22, through tribulation, we shall enter the kingdom of God. I think we do that personally. We go through our greatest trials. It's a doorway to the kingdom. It's a gateway to entering the Lord's kingdom and his domain. We need to seize every trial that way, and we need to seize the trials in the earth. Right now, we are Morningstar going through one of our greatest financial challenges ever. I think we're going to come out of it in the kingdom in an unprecedented way financially. I'm just saying, that's how these things work. If we embrace it with faith. But, the Lord has endless resources. Do we believe in him? He says he'll always lead us in his triumph. So if we follow him, we will see the triumph of the Lord. And that's what we want to do. Don't doubt. Don't fall to all that comes against you. Keep following him. But we are entering some really difficult times in America. I'm thankful for the leadership we have that is so clear and decisive. They see the enemy. And they're not afraid to use the sword they've been given to deal with that enemy. They're going to have to use that sword, or we will be overwhelmed with that enemy. And that's going to be worse. That would be much worse. But I am so thankful. Pray for your leaders. Pray for our government. Pray for our president, his whole cabinet. I think he has assembled, in my opinion, the greatest cabinet ever. We've got the greatest team ever leading our country right now. Things are not going perfectly. Not even as they planned. But they're going in the right direction. And pretty soon they're going to have to be even more resolute in the use of the sword. And that's my encouraging word for today. It is going to turn out good, but it's going to be really hard for a while. Don't give up during the hard times. Enter the kingdom. Believe the Lord. So, anyway, that's my rant for today. And I hope you're going to see that every day is an opportunity to enter his kingdom. Today, if you hear his voice, don't wait for tomorrow. Today, hear his voice and draw closer to him. Today is the day of salvation. And I'm praying that for you and everyone who hears this. Today, that today would be a great day of when salvation comes to you and through you to others. And you know what? I've gotten some of the most encouraging emails and texts from you, especially people that get on our app. I try to post on that app as often as I can. I would like to do it daily and hope to be able to do that at some point where I can post daily. But I hear from people on that app every day. I don't know many of them or anything, but they become friends on the app. But some of the most greatest encouraging things have come to me on that one. Several people have just written recently thanking me of how my love for the Lord was contagious. Now that's a prayer. I don't think I've ever said this before, but I've been praying that prayer. I think I've prayed more than any other prayer in my life. For many years, decades, I take the prayer of Jesus in John 17, the night before he was crucified. And one of the things he prayed was that the love the Father had for him would be in us. And that's a prayer I've been praying, trying to pray every day to the Father. Father, fill me with your love for your Son, Jesus, that I would be a part of. I know you're going to answer Jesus' prayer. We know that Son of God, everything he prayed, we can be sure his prayers are going to be answered. So you want to have answered prayer, pray the same thing he prayed. Not pray that, Lord, may your love for your Son Jesus fill me. And I've asked him to make me contagious with it. And everywhere I go, and I infect people with the love of God, love for God, love for Jesus. And I've received some, not many, but a few have said they felt I was contagious with this love for God, and they were catching it on that app. Well, thank you. That encouraged me. You don't know how long, several days now, since those were written, those testimonies. Man, it had me walking on air. That's my highest goal, is to be so filled with the love of God, the love of the Father, the love of the Son. Everywhere I go, I infect people with it. They catch it. And listen, this is something, if you really catch it, you can't be cured. You'll fall, you'll get worse and worse. You'll fall more and more in love with him, because he is the most lovable being there will ever be in all of creation, because God is love. So you cannot encounter him without loving him. The highest calling we have on the earth as human beings is to love God above all. So that should be one thing we resolve we want to do every day. And it's simple to do it. All you have to do is learn one thing about God every day and ask him to be your teacher. But learn one thing. You cannot learn about God without loving him more, because he is love. If you learn about him, you're going to learn love. And I take Bob Jones' exhortation, he used to say to us for years, have you learned to love yet? Well, that's what we're called to do. That's the main thing we're called to do. But the main one we're called to love is God. We cannot love our neighbors like we should if we don't love God as we're called to, above all things. Thank you for joining me for today's rant. There's something of a coming of the presence of the Lord, the manifest presence of the Lord, that is going to precede his coming, that is going to precede his coming. I tell you, he's going to come to his temple. He's going to come in his temple before he comes to it. There's going to be something of his manifest presence in his people. Open our eyes to see you, know you, follow you, and to be used by you. And anoint us to preach the whole message of this life.